My father came from an Orthodox Jewish family. They were immigrants from the little village of Orsha. Lots of anti-Semitism. You had no future living there. And they landed at the Lower East Side. They moved into New Jersey, and that's where their life really began. My grandmother became pregnant there during that year. My father was 15 pounds when he was born. He was meant to be a big man. He was living the life of an American now, and Americans played sports. So my father excelled in 6 sports. Believe it or not, my father played professional baseball when he was 15 years old. He got 50 cents a game, and he learned boxing, and he was a long-distance swimmer in high school. During his junior year, he saw an ad in the paper that said, "Would you like to be a forest ranger in the Adirondacks?" He convinced his parents to let him go. That's where he really learned to love the outdoors. My father enlisted in the Army in 1918. He knew war was coming, and he knew he was young, and he knew he would go no matter what, to pay this beautiful country back for what they gave his family and other families like him. His parents said he was too young. He was 18, the age was 21. He told his parents if they didn't let him go, he would never come home again, and he meant it. So his father went down with him and said, "Yes, my son," there were no birth certificates then, said, "is just 21 years old." And the recruiter said, "Fine, that's it." In Charlotte, Camp Green, the initial training grounds for the 4th Infantry Division, he was part of the first group. So they were not only soldiers, they were builders too. They built a hospital, they built dining room, they built a living quarters. But they were young, and they so looked forward to going to the front. They had no idea what was in store for them. He was sent to the front almost immediately. The letters that he wrote, he said, France is a beautiful country. And he also wrote to a fellow student at the Ranger School, and he said, "I'm sure you see what I see. This going over there is not what it's cracked up to be." He never, ever, even then, would get into the detail of the horrendous scenes that he would see in that army.
My grandfather did not hide his affinity and respect and gratitude for the United States Army. He loved the Army, but he never spoke of battle or war, the particulars of his valor or the horror that he was certain to have experienced in time of war was not something that I knew him to have shared with his grandchildren or even his own children, so far as I know.
It was the 2nd Marne. He was now a sergeant. The battling right near the Vail River was horrendous. There was gas being dropped down from planes. There was machine gun and cannon fire. All of this while you were crossing, holding onto a gas mask, which was critical. Their rifles had to be kept up, their gas masks dry, and you couldn't do that if you couldn't swim. Half the guys couldn't swim. My father said they would throw logs, trees, anything to help his platoon cross. They finally did cross, and they came to near railroad tracks, and there was a gigantic field. The officer in charge sent 2 scouts out. They were killed immediately. They sent 3 more out. And if you could envision a wide open field, a football field and a half, and way in the distance, he saw 3 men that he knew very well, especially Jim Pritchard, his dearest friend. He was wounded and went down. He had to make the decision with Jim. Do I watch him die? Or do I die myself, probably going up after him?
The choice for Sergeant Shemin was clear. He would climb up and over the trench line and run 150 yards, the length of a football field and a half, to rescue Jim Pritchard, trapped in no man's land. The sky was clear and sunny, forcing Shemin to rely on his athletic training for the speed, endurance, and strength to dodge heavy machine gun and rifle fire with little to no cover from enemy crosshairs. Upon reaching Pritchard, he found his friend too wounded to make it back to the trench line on his own. Sergeant Shemin threw him over his shoulder and carried Pritchard back through enemy fire to safety. There were still 2 men left out in no man's land, so Shemin left the safety of the trench line again, risking his life 2 more times to make sure no one was left behind.
After the 3rd time, he was able to pull together his platoon because all of the officers in charge had been wounded or killed. He was now in charge of the platoon. So he evacuated the seriously wounded that he brought in and other wounded, pulled his platoon together, and then went into this little village of Bazoches, population 1,000. Hand-to-hand combat. It was devastated. When you see pictures, it was like Dresden. There was just a wall here, a front porch here, fighting hand to hand. And that's when he was wounded, and they found him the next day. And they had evacuated him into the hospital where he spent 5 weeks. He was supposed to go home because he now was deaf in that ear. But his unit was heading toward the Meuse-Argonne, and there he was. He joined his unit again. This was the final situation in World War I, the Meuse-Argonne. He was just out of the hospital. Now he goes into the worst battle of his life. Then the 4th Division was asked to be the Army of Occupation. He had a choice. He said, of course I'm staying. He stayed with the Army of Occupation, played baseball with them. They asked him, you were just shot in the head. You're supposed to be playing baseball. He played football with them too. And he said it was nothing. And he stayed on until 1919.
For his actions during the Battle of the Second Marne, William Shemin was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, though his commanding officers and fellow service members felt the award should be raised to the Medal of Honor. He was denied on the basis of his faith. But Shemin was fully satisfied with the Distinguished Service Cross and never sought further recognition for his actions during the Second Marne.
At the end of the war, General Pershing was going to travel in a victory tour throughout all of Europe. They asked for a group of soldiers who were decorated and that were near 6 feet tall. My father now had the Purple Heart. He had the Distinguished Service Cross, our second highest. He wanted to go with this honor guard. It was the biggest honor ever to accompany the commander-in-chief himself. There was a doctor that came. The doctor said, no Jew is going with him. It breaks my heart to even say that. That was the thing, I would say, in the war that was the hardest thing ever to live with. My father then went on to open up a nursery and greenhouse business in the Bronx. The actual logo was the 4th Infantry Division, and that's where the 3 of us were born, in the business. Literally, we all worked there. And loved it. He loved being outside. Even in the years he could barely walk, he always had a hoe with him, and he'd use the hoe with his cane. He was larger than life in almost everything he did. His whole adult life was spent helping others, military, that needed the help. I can tell you everything about life was like before he saw action. But we saw that do not go there. He would either change the subject, or he wouldn't become belligerent, but he just wouldn't say. But when Jim Pritchard would come, and he would come 3 or 4 times a year and stay with us for a few days at a time, he was the one, when I was 12, that said, your father deserved the Medal of Honor, but he didn't get it because he was a Jew. And part of what my father installed in me is to be proud that you're a Jew. How dare they? I was so, even as a little kid, I was so hurt and so angry. And I was angry at my father. Why isn't he angry and I'm angry? And that's when he told me, he said, it's not about medals. End of conversation. I fought for my country.
Sergeant Shemin was not the only Jewish soldier who went above and beyond the call of duty that was overlooked for the Medal of Honor. Beginning in 2002, Congress mandated reviews of Valor Awards given to Jewish soldiers. However, the review only went back to records from World War II. Shemin's daughter and Jewish veterans lobbied to expand the review to include records from World War I. They finally succeeded in 2011.
The review started, and then it hits the Department of Defense, the Department of Army, and then it goes to the president. And then it was done. I got a call from the Pentagon, and they said, you're going to get an important call. Be at your house at 9 o'clock in the morning. The telephone rings. This is Barack Obama. And I said, my God, Mr. President, I voted for you. I couldn't think of what do you say in my kitchen at 9 o'clock in the morning when the president calls you? He told me how honored he was and what a long journey this has been for me and our family too. Everybody was in awe of the family. There was 60 of us there. The president said a platoon of Shemins are sitting out there. It was so thrilling to be us in the White House. The Jew that didn't deserve to be with General Pershing is now being honored by a president. How wonderful is that? He would have been ramrod straight. He'd be wearing his one suit. He only had one suit. He'd be reliving what he did in the Army while he's standing there. And there would be tears in his eyes, as there was with all of us.
To attend the ceremony at the White House to honor my grandfather's valor and achievements was an amazing experience. To be in that historic building, to see the paintings on the walls, to see the staff working. It was so beautiful to see Barack Obama award the Medal of Honor to my mother and my Aunt Ina for my grandfather. He was a survivor and a hero and a leader.
I mean, he was a larger-than-life figure, and you came into this family, even as a small child, knowing that this man who sat erect and shoulders square had been a war hero. So it was just something that came along with the price of admission that Grandpa Shemin was a hero. My grandfather, he ran the equivalent of a football field and a half on 3 occasions to rescue wounded. Hard to imagine being able to do more in terms of courageous action in wartime.
He was a wonderful man. He was very serious, very goal-oriented. He was a role model and a hero.
My father would be so shocked. I don't think it would change anything else about him, except that this is the medal, and I'm so honored. No greater honor anywhere.